old days, if your cue was loaded right, butted up against the beginning, sometimes it wouldn't notice it. It would skip that first cue. I think that's been fixed, but I don't chance it. I never chance that anymore. I always leave my first cue just like this far off. Your cue was loaded right, butted up against the beginning. Sometimes it wouldn't notice it. I'm getting a little feedback. Is that from me? But I don't chance it. I never chance that anymore. I always leave my first cue just like this far off. Whose mic? Is that from my mic?
No.
I'm getting a little feedback. Is that from me?
We're hearing two audio feeds a few seconds
That was
apart.
me.
Oh, okay. Cool. Oh, it's probably from the YouTube. Sorry, let me admit somebody. Okay, so that was a feature, or something that has been fixed in the past. So I would always be really careful to put those up against each other. So when you're going to this trim show, remove empty time at the start of the show. I never do that out of just habit these days. If you want to test it out, go for it. It's just, it always is that scary moment in the back of my brain that I'm going to trust it, and then it doesn't work that one day. So I've, over the years, just never done that. Remove empty time at the end of show. That's great. I want to remove all this empty time. Delete cueless tracks. That's perfect. It cleans up all this stuff where I don't have any, as long as you don't have a cue in it, it's going to get rid of it. So all I have to do is hit OK, and voila. It doesn't get rid of the control track, which is smart. I like that. But it gets rid of everything else. And here's, you can see I don't know if you can tell on my screen, but this is all grayed out. This is where it ends. And another great reason for this, if you're making a sub show, if you have, let me do this. I'll show you. I don't know if you can know, hopefully you all know that you can go edit, insert time at bar, or delete time at bar. So you can manually shift some things. So I'm just going to add in, say, 20 seconds. All this time. So here's my wonderful sub show, which is kind of terrible. Hits a scene, hits a slide, and then you have 20 seconds of nothing. If this is a subroutine, your audience is sitting there waiting for 20 seconds of nothing before it would, at this moment right here where the show ends, it jumps back to the main. So now you've just made people sit for like 20 seconds painfully in silence, doing nothing. So this is trimming your shows, for me, is a no-brainer. You want to trim it so it comes right out of that sub and you're ready to go. And I'll get into subroutines here in a second of like how to properly use them, but I hope that makes some sense. So that was the trim. We talked about pinning yesterday. I'm not going to talk about pinning again unless someone wants to see it again. Did anyone? You know what? I don't know if all of you were, I think all of you were in there. If anyone wants to see pinning, raise your hand or say something now so I don't skip over you.
Show it.
Is that all right, everybody? Okay. So finally, this is a fun one. Years ago, I think Dan has really used this a lot more than I have. And I really wanted this because I think it'd be really fun to do these types of shows. I wanted the audience to be interactive. I want them to have the ability to interact with the show and maybe even like do a choose your own adventure. I used to love those books where you could like, please flip to this page, or if you choose this, flip to that page. And so you can do that on the Dome now. You can actually have your audience choose their own adventure. So I just wanted to show you this ability in case you have never seen this before. So on one of your cues, hold on, it might be up at the top. So it's under a control here. You see this BRV, branch vote. If I click on this, oh yeah, you have to save your show. Let me save this. Really good show. Now, if I go into the branch vote, you see that it looks like confusing at first, but it's actually really simple. What this is going to do is it's going to pull up buttons in this kind of formation right here on your render box. So on the screen. And what's really fun is all you have to do is click here and I can add in a different sub show. So basically it's letting me add 5 different sub shows, 5 different paths that will let me go. And if you want to go to, if your audience picks, go to Jupiter, say the top one is like a Jupiter, this is a Mars, Saturn, you're on like some sort of where in the world is Carmen Sandiego type of thing. And so you could have them go to different places and you could leave them clues along the way. So this is just a really cool little, I love this little idea. I really wanted to spend more time and develop a show off of this and let the audience kind of pick where you want to go. And I haven't done it yet, and I should. But it works. If you click on like whatever one your audience decides, you can click on it. I think that the side touch allows audience members to pick. So you could almost have like a designated audience member who's the leader, somebody you trust, I hope, that would click on it and let them start choosing their own paths. And I think that'd be fun. It'd be a much more interactive experience for the audience to try to choose which way to go.
Steve, can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah, please.
So since I haven't looked at that before, do you have to use the side touch with that, or is that something you could do from the console?
No, you can do it from the console.
Okay, so what are top, left, center, right, and bottom then? Like what buttons?
I'll show you. I'm just gonna, this is not going to look good or be fun at all, but hopefully give you an idea of what happens. Yeah, I forget what layout is. Okay. So I don't know if you noticed, but it just loaded all of those in the background. So it's ready to play any of them when this hits. So let's just play it. So when this hits, I get this on my screen.
That's super straightforward.
Yep. So if you want this one, and I would call it I wouldn't call it terrible names. Jupiter, whatever. And then once you pick one, it goes right into that subroutine. As you can tell, I picked a new show that has nothing in it, so it's very boring.
Steve, can you show what comes up on RenderBox?
Hold on, I need to find my there. Help you out a little bit. Okay. So let's see. I want to go back. Oh.
Let's go to crap.
So here we go. I thought it came up on RenderBox.
It said video server stress test.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought for sure it came up on RenderBox.
No, it doesn't.
No?
No. I've used this. It doesn't. The audience doesn't see the choices.
That's right. What happens is Dan used to actually put them up as a slide.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what it was.
Slides to point to
Yeah.
to choose their direction.
That's what he used to do. So no, it doesn't show to you.
It doesn't work with SciTouch.
Doesn't work?
No.
See, I think that would be a really fun thing to add in personally.
I think they were working on it, and then Garland retired, so
yeah,
who knows?
Those guys retiring was not a fun day.
Mm.
So no, it doesn't work on the SciTouch. I thought it did. I thought you could actually
run it one more time, Steve. Look at the video stress thing that comes up. What is that?
That might be, I put right here, video stress. Maybe if I put something else in there. So I saw it load all of them down there. I can't move them. I don't know if you noticed that. It loaded all the
yeah, in the background, yeah.
Hold on, I want to see what else I can do here. Just curious what this does.
If it loads them all in, does that mean there's a fear of having too many branches and overloading ATM-4?
I had never had that problem, but that's just me.
Not with 5 branches.
Oops.
Well, I was thinking though, if you have those and then you give them more options and it keeps sort of branching on in the show.
I doubt it, Megan.
But ATM-4 doesn't consider these sub-shows. It's like just as if you had a lot of shows open, but you're just only playing one at a time, whether you start it.
Yeah, it's only going to play one at a time.
In a way, or it's not a sub-show.
Yeah,
So,
I wasn't sure if it cared how many shows you had open, so good. It doesn't.
Apparently, these little buttons I can drag around. If I hold down I'm holding down the right key. So pressing the left, I think, will put me into, I'm going to test this out. Yeah, so I am getting little buttons that I can move around my screen. I'm having a hard time understanding if that's going to be where they're going to show up in terms of pre-flight or render box, but they are showing up as buttons that I can press on. That's kind of fun and interesting.
Yeah, that's called play with it in your dome.
Yeah, I'd have to see that on the dome. But apparently, as of the last time, a lot of people here are saying that they don't work on the dome and they aren't worth side touch. But for some reason, in the back of my brain, I thought that was something either experimentally around or not. But it's something to play with. You can definitely use it, as you saw, with the big buttons that pop up on the user screen. And then you could just have some sort of image that would let your audience know, Jupiter, or make sure it's obvious for them and then obvious for you to click on it on the control panel.
Dan actually built a choose your own adventure show. It's called the Solar System Protection Agency.
Yeah,
it's
super
pretty
fun.
cool. And it has a number of different branches in it, and it doesn't make ATM-4 unhappy at all. So
That's his Minecrafty one, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Super fun.
It's very cool.
If you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely worth seeing. Okay. Any other little things about anything I've showed so far before? What I'm going to do now, I'd like to talk about how to put together a show soup to nuts, now that we understand what soup to nuts actually is.
Hey, Steve, I have a question way back at that search function.
Sure.
So does it just work for things that are on the control track, or is it just for things that are on the track that you highlighted?
I think it only works with things that have a tag value.
Okay.
So if you can add a tag value to some things, which I believe some things can get a tag value and others can't. So you don't see any tag values here, but if you can add a tag to some of these things. So I think you either have to add in what's called the tag value or a pause. I'm pretty sure that you can search to a slide itself. But again, that's something you'd have to test. I've only searched for stuff on the top, like Boston. Although, as you can tell, if you name a lot of things, Boston, 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 that won't necessarily be helpful. So anyway, any other questions? I hope that helped. I'm pretty sure you can only search to tags. All right. Putting a show together. I've talked about this, I think, almost every year. Hopefully you guys who have heard this aren't too bored. Where do you begin? I began with Dr. Bradstreet had written out all of the narration, the story. And I believe that is a really great place to start. You're going to storyboard your show and, honest to goodness, record that narration, because that gave me the foundation that I built everything else upon. So first thing you're going to want to do is go and record all of that. Now, you can always edit it. Remember, it's not like you're set in stone. If you don't like the way a certain scene or a certain line works, you could always go and re-record that stuff. But going through, and this is what I did. Remember, other people work totally differently. Go through and get all that narration. On top of that, here's where some people have branched off of me. I would definitely go in and put my soundtrack behind all that narration. So I would have my whole audio ready to go at that point. Now, some people are saying, no, I'm going to make my whole show and then I'm going to go put audio to that. But I can't do that because I like to have certain sounds and certain things timed perfectly to what's going on. And there's no way you're going to make your show first and then time your soundtrack to that. That's no way. I don't believe it. You're going to be there for a year just doing that. So I make my soundtrack. I have all my narration ready to go. And I have that file. And that file would be loaded in, and I'd be running off of that file for all the shows that I'm making at that point, or all the subroutines. And then I would start breaking it into subroutines. So when someone is talking about, I would compartmentalize my show into different scenes in my head. And then I would just start, honest to goodness, breaking it down into this sub show, and I'd work on that sub show. We're going to talk about supernova. I'm going to do all the supernova stuff. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. I would then, there's two ways I would do this. I would go get all the assets I need. I would go get all of the slides, the movies that I think I'm going to need, that I think will fill up that time slot. So in my head, because I've already done the narration. I've already done my soundtrack. I have an idea of how many minutes each scene is. Like, all right, we talked for a good 2 minutes during this comet scene. I need 2 minutes worth of visualization, whether that's going to be a movie, whether it's going to be a slide. I need 2 minutes of entertainment, or else it's going to be really boring. Or like a 2-minute scene where, you know, you're flying through an orrery type situation or something. You're flying through the solar system. And so I would go and start getting all of that together before I'm going to start trying to put it all together. I would try and get all my slides. If you want to add in some later on, no problem, but at least have something to work off of. I'm a big proponent of setting up your skeleton and getting all the other little pieces together later on. Trying to do, it's overwhelming to begin with, let alone trying to, you know, make sure you have just start, editing is the fun part. So get your bones together and then go from there. So how do sub-shows work, and what's good practice for using subroutines? A subroutine, I'm gonna go find one. Perfect. So I'm just going to pick out this subroutine right here. When this timeline, for those of you who are unfamiliar with what subs are and how they work, when the timeline runs into this sub, we will now jump out of this ATM-4 queue. So I'm right now in the Boy Scouts right here. It will jump into a totally different show. So I'm going to activate that. And here we are. I've jumped into the show, which all of you, I think, have seen, the one where it show the planets versus the size of the sun. Super simple. So now what will happen now? This show will run. It'll hit a pause, you unpause. And this is where we're talking as the presenter, we're talking. Now here's the interesting part. Right here. The show, these are all fading out. So all of our slides are fading out and we're getting ready to go back to the main one. Now this is all dependent on how much time this show is. So right here, this will kick back out. I'm going to show this to you, but this will now kick back out and go back into our main. So I'm just going to play this for a second. If I can find my... And watch what happens. It's going to jump back in. Now I'm going to stop it. Notice that we go right into another subroutine. I come out of the one subroutine, and now it takes about 1 more second, and I'm about to enter another one. Watch. Goes right into another show. Now looking back at everything, this is how every single one of my main routines would be. I would have nothing on the main besides my sub shows, and maybe a couple little intermediate like fade outs or fade out, like fade up a scene and fade down a scene to make a nice transition. I would do everything like this, because now I have another show with the Stellar Sizes show that will run the same exact way. And so the show will run, the show will run, the show will run. I get right down here to the end. After I have this pause, when the show gets to the end right here, boop, I come back into the main, and here we go again. So does everyone have a pretty clear understanding of how subroutines work and why to use subroutines? Anyone have any questions about subroutines?
I did.
Megan put one on the chat, Steve.
Oh,
Yeah, can it, like the branches that you showed us before, could you use that somehow with these subs where it would branch out and then bring you back to your main show, and then you could move on to your next topic rather than continuously branching out into other shows?
I don't think so. I've never done it enough. I don't know what happens at the end of a branched show. If they act like a subroutine and pull you back, anyone ever experiment with that?
I'm trying to think of
I
what
did.
it looked like with Dan's show, and I think you have to put a link at the end if you want it to go back to something else.
Yeah, I think you have to link to it.
When you get to when you branch to an ATM-4 show and it gets to the end, it's done. It's
That's
stopped.
what I thought. Yeah.
And the hard part is if it was called by a show halfway through and you want to go back to that same spot, that's really hard. I don't know how to do that. So if you want to go back to that original show, you've got to do it as a sub show. If you don't ever want to go back, then you do it as a branch.
But if you call the sub, it automatically, the moment it hits the end of the timeline, it jumps back to that spot automatically. No cues needed.
Nope. Always. Every single time. I've never had to put anything at the end of a subroutine. The only thing you want to make sure you do, and again, I'm reiterating this 100 times, trim your show up. don't put a bunch of empty space at the end, because I've had that happen before. And I'm like, man, why is nothing happening? And I'm just sitting here. I'm like, oh, nuts. I haven't trimmed my show yet. And just wasting my time sitting there doing production work.
I have to pay him.
So question for you, Steve.
Sure.
Do you think you could use the branches, and is there a way to assign it to do a random thing so that you could use that as a way? Oh, but it's not really a sub show, because I was going to say that would be a way to like automatically change up your show so your repeat people would see a different show if you randomly went to different subs.
I see what you're saying. There's an interesting idea there where if you have an audience that has been a repeat audience, you could make it a branch instead, as long as you don't ever need to go back to your main. Like I guess I would separate it in my head that way, that I would write a show. If I was going to write a branching show, I know in my head that when I get to that branch, I'm done. And I'm going to then create new content and a whole new show from that point. I don't love that idea all the time in terms of I was creating a show like what you're saying, where you could have the audience have like a different path every time. Yeah, I don't know what to do with repeat audience members all the time. I think if they're coming back that many times, hopefully you're doing something right. And I don't worry about them too much. Kind of like you guys.
I kick them out.
Yeah, kick them out. Something like that. So anyway, yeah, someone did mention using a link. So I see a question down here. I don't use links very often. So let me see if I can even find out how these work. So you can link back to a show, but if I'm having a wild guess here, you can only link back to the beginning of said show. So let's find out. So if I put this link in, hit that. So here's an interesting idea, and I'm going to start going down a little bit of, uh-oh. Did I blow up my computer? Definitely blow up ATM-4. Hold on. I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, which I apologize for those of you who are, I'm going a little bit into the advanced world. Okay, good. I didn't blow everything up. Here's how you can make this work for those of you who want to jump back out and use a link. So the link will jump you out into another show. It's acting like a directed. So are we all on the same page of what a link is doing? The link is pulling you into another show, similar to a subroutine. So what I would do, I would go in and say, here, I'll show you with the Boy Scouts. So here's where I put in my branch right here. So this is my branching key right here. Now I want my show to come back right there. I would go delete all this stuff, make a new show from this point on. So it would start right here and link to that show. And that would work. It's painful. You have to go in every time you put a branch in. I'd have to then delete everything up to that branch so that it starts right at that point. But you could then do it with that link now that I think about it. And it's not impossible. You just have to, I would make the whole thing. And then every time I hit a branch, I just have to make sure I cut it from that point. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying? I'd be deleting everything that's already played, saving that as branching show number 2, branching show number 3, and then I just link to branch show number 2, and that would start right here after that branch, and then I'd be able to go into the next branch, and so on. So it is a way around it. I think that that would be a lot for me personally in my head, but hey, it'd be kind of fun to create a show that way. Yeah, I agree with Christy. If you have branches, you really need a clear plan. Like I'm pretty sure Dan had it all planned out, how the rabbit hole goes. Okay, so are we all right with sub shows? I'm going to keep going if that's okay. And now, I in my notes I do add this, and I want to make this apparent again. One of the best things they added into this as a feature, and I love this feature. Chasing audio into sub shows. You can actually get rid of that if you want. But chasing audio into sub shows for the creation that I like to do, and I said this yesterday, I'll put in a soundtrack on my main right here. So I'll put in some sound file. right here, and that will play even when I go into my sub show. Meaning, so I'm now doing editing in here. So I'm in production mode, and I need to have a comet and this beautiful sound hit at the same time. That sound's now playing in the background, even though I don't have a soundtrack loaded in here. It never used to do that. In the old days, I used to have to load it again, seek to the point in time that I was when the sub show started, and then play the sound, and I'd still probably be off by half a second. I'm never that good to exactly get the timing correct. So when I think it was Garland or Reese added this in, this is the best thing ever. Now I can do all my editing with just the soundtrack playing from the main cue here. So I don't know if you start messing with this and playing with it, I think it will make a lot more sense. So if you load your soundtrack now in your main, it'll play in all these subroutines on here as long as you've played into it.
I have a quick question with that.
Sure.
So I was recently working on making a show where I have audio playing from the main and it jumps into sub shows, but in order to condense space in that main show, we've made sub shows that are timed out, like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so if using that chasing audio, will it play through those sub shows so then your timing is correct if you jump anywhere when it's stopped? Because I was having a similar issue where the timing was different if I clicked somewhere randomly to play as opposed to playing it from start to finish.
Correct.
Does that correct that?
Yeah, no, I think you are correct in saying that you have to play it through that sub show, because it won't have knowledge all the time that I don't know if it knows without going into it at least once that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to do some experimentation on that because I've never actually tried playing a show like what you're saying. But you're saying basically you lose 5 or 10 seconds because you're not going into that. You want to just jump over them and start here.
Right, and have it be how it should match up.
Exactly. I'd have to test that because I rarely ever, I think it actually works, but I don't know.
Okay.
I'd have to go test that out because I've never had to try that in a show. It's a good question though.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could play with that after, probably tonight I'll take a look at it and just throw it in my machine and see if it works. All right. Oh, there's another question. Oh, that's a good question. From David, I want to, no, don't save it. I'll go back to my crap. I don't have crap anymore. There. If you click on this, will it act like a sub show? Will it bring it back? Let's find out. There's an easy way to find out. Let's just put one here. Can't hurt. Make it something short. Called a sub show.
It's the same show, Steve.
I know. Should still work. Yep. Okay. When it hits, oh nuts! It's got that stupid thing in it. I see what you're saying. I basically created a permanent loop.
You're in an infinite loop.
Yeah, I'm in a loop. I want to go into this sub show because it's short though. Here. Messing up the curriculum for you guys.
You don't save, Steve.
I won't. All right, let's see what happens. Would I click that? Yeah, okay. So if that little thing is clicked, hopefully this will now act like a sub show. And kick
It does.
back
I
up.
just tested it myself. I was just messaging you about it, Steve.
Awesome.
I just built a test file that does exactly that. If you click that button, it doesn't return to the original show. Or rather, if you don't click that button, it doesn't. If you click that button, it treats it like a sub show and comes back.
There you go. Garland and Reese,
Yep.
geniuses.
I knew they were working on it. And I'm like, that's got to be it.
Yeah. So there you go. You can actually have it pop back out for you. That's a really nice little feature. Okay. So yeah, that's awesome. Good little catch there and find. Okay. So the next thing I would do after you get all your assets, going back to putting together a whole show, get everything you need. And then I would actually go in and create my initial scene and any other scenes in my head that I think I'll need. I'm a big proponent of just trying to get everything together before going in and doing the creation process. I find that if you have one piece that's missing, it can really slow you down sometimes. So I try my best. I set up all my scenes. I get all my slides. Of course, you'll be missing one or two, and that's okay. But again, get your slides and scenes ready. Get your OAs ready if you can. I would go in and try and create all my OAs and have them timed out correctly to the music. Lists and toggles, I talked about that a little bit in my handout. I'd have all my organizational things set up. I'd have my template ready for all of that. And really just getting those sub shows built in and put together is really all I would be doing. I would be adding in, I'd create my sub show on Halley's Comet, and then I would go create my sub show on Supernova, and all these pieces get put together, label them correctly, and honest to goodness, you'll be surprised how easy a lot of this stuff is. Any questions though on like where you would be starting or what you'd be doing on putting a show together? I'd be happy to answer any. I am by far not an expert in any of this. I just have done it and failed a lot.
I have one probably anybody could answer here except me. Creating a sub show, how is that different than creating a show? How does it know it's a sub show?
It's not at all. So it's a great question. This is any of these things that I've been showing you. So this right here, I could make this a sub show. I can make any single show into a sub show. So anything, if I just do open, all of these, anything in the full dome curriculum and the mini lessons here, every single one of these, I could basically call a sub show, and I'll show you. It's real simple. All you do, I'm going to create a new file. And on the control line way up here, there's a little tiny button called sub. And you can see if I click on it, it's a very simple little guy asking you to define what show is going to be the sub show. So if I click on that button, and you can see I'm already in full dome curriculum mini lessons. I just pick one. I'll pick the dog days. I'm going to hit open and OK here. And when the timeline hits here, I completely jump out of this show called new show up here, and I would go into the dog days. And that's it. I've defined dog days in this show as a sub show. That's all.
So Steve,
okay,
what you're saying,
I got it.
Yeah, what you're saying is that the definition of being a sub show is defined by how it's called, not the show itself.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep.
Everything's a show. And then if you want to call another show into your show, they call it a sub show. It's like a subroutine in the program. So yeah, basically when I say create your subs, I mean create all of your mini shows that will be added to your main show. That's really what I should be. That's the language I should be using. Create all these little shows, and in the long run, you'll be then adding them together as one big super show with a bunch of sub callings, if you want to call it that. Well, Dr. B, I'm not leaving you with a ton of time here. I didn't know if you wanted to start up whatever you wanted to show for 7 minutes.
Yeah, I actually can, Steve.
Perfect.
I'll whet people's appetites, and then if they're not interested, I'm going to do it in the next session anyway.
Perfect.
I put in the chat box at the very beginning of this session a file called geminiindepth.q that I would recommend everybody download and save in their shows folder. You could use this as a template for building sub shows on individual constellations. And what I'd like to do in the few minutes we have left is show you what that looks like. Just to give you, again, these are just ideas. You don't have to follow what I do, but I've always wanted to have a library of sub shows that I could just quick pull up in case my audience wanted to look at a constellation in a little more depth than I usually do, but obviously you can't do 10 of them in a show. So let me share my render box screen, and I'll show you what this looks like, and then we'll talk about it. So you should be seeing my, yeah, and there's the Gemini in depth thing you can download. I'll talk about that in depth in the next hour. If you want better jokes, you got to pay more money. Okay, so I'm going to just run the thing to show you what it looks like, and then we'll talk about it. Can everybody see my render box screen and the Q file? I see heads nodding, so I guess that's a good thing. All right, let me run this puppy. Let's see what happens. This, I think, also can be used on online stuff because you can zoom into a certain part of the sky. You'll see what I mean in a second. So I'm starting off in a December sky. I've got the pause things down here so you can see what's about to happen. But we're going to do Gemini in depth. I also did Taurus and Orion. Once you've done one, you can use that as a template to do all of them. So the first one took me a little while, but then the other ones are fairly trivial. So, you know, there's the name. And then I toggle the display on. So this is assuming everybody's in the dome and they're oohing and ahhing all that garbage. Okay. There's the boundary in case you want to show it. Again, this is all optional. I'm just showing the things you can do. And then the bright stars in the constellation, whatever they are, that's the list command. And now I love this star. I'm going to center the sky on a star that's central to the constellation. Then I'm going to zoom in. And the central star in Gemini is, what's that? You had to be there. So I'll teach you how to do that in the next hour if you're nice. So I just centered on what's that. And now I'm going to zoom in to a field of about 30 degrees. So you can see immediately how you could use this online because now you've got this zoomed in feature and it's very visible, easy to see. So what I want to do is I want to zoom in. The most obvious feature is this funny little blue thing over here, and that's M35, the open cluster. So I'm going to center on that. So it's like I have a telescope and I'm turning to it. And now we're going to zoom in and look at M35. This nice open cluster of relatively young stars, hence the color. And then there's another object that's kind of sexy in Gemini. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm just going to zoom on it. And this is lying to you. I forgot. This is after I did Taurus. I forgot to change the cue. So keep watching. You'll recognize it shortly. Yeah, I don't know if you know that the Eskimo Nebula is in Gemini. I did not. And then, so you could put in as many zoom ins as you want, depending on, you know what I mean? I think 2 is just to give you an idea. Your audience might get bored if you did like 10, but that's entirely up to you. And then the very last thing is we go back to the full sky. So the idea here in this subroutine is simply to give you a template, which you can then start. Notice I didn't say Gemini illustration, Gemini boundary. These toggles, which Steve told us about yesterday, you can just use these same cues and just change this guy to Gemini or whatever constellation you're doing. So you can make use of some of the same cues, no matter what constellation you're using. Does that make sense to people? And this way you could have this, you could build this library of constellations. And if you're asking yourself, well, I'm not really an expert on what's in a constellation. As I try to teach my wife, if you don't know something, just go to the internet. The internet knows everything. And the internet is always right. So the website that I use, let me show you the website I use. See if I can find it here. Got enough screens. Some nice clothing here, ladies, in case you're interested, but that's not why I'm here. This is Constellation Guide. It's www.constellation-guide.com. I find this to be an extremely good resource if you've never used it. And this has a lot of information about every constellation and some of the interesting deep sky objects in it, etc. So it's a quick and dirty way of getting, you know, if you're only going to do a couple of objects, which is what I would do, this would be a great source for you to find it. So you might want to write that down because that's going to be your exercise for the next hour, is you're going to make a constellation sub-show, your own constellation. And you can use the Gemini in-depth queue file as a template, as a starting point, if you want. Okay,
Steve, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm not in it for questions, Chris. I'm just doing this for the money.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So I noticed on your, I noticed in your example, you mentioned, keeping your track names agnostic of the constellation, but you did have Gemini label in there. I was just curious if that was something that you intentionally did, or, you know.
And yeah, I did that because I just wanted to make sure that maybe some other user might be using that routine. That would remind them this is the Gemini one, even though the title of it says Gemini in depth. You know what I mean? You don't have to. You could indeed make it general.
Yeah.
But changing a track name is as simple as double clicking on it and editing it. You know what I mean? It's so it's trivial to do.
Right.
And you should really change the cues. Like I left M1 because I did Taurus. You really should change the cues, because that's going to confuse the daylights out of people when you're going to the Eskimo Nebula and it was labeled M1. You're going to be like, wait a minute, that's Taurus. What's going on?
Right.
So.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So that's what I'm planning to do in the ATM-4 workshop. If that doesn't interest you, there are other things we can do. But I just thought that might be something that is not super simple, but it's not super advanced, and it's something that everybody might be interested in using, especially in COVID days.
Dr. Reed, can I ask a quick question for you?
No.
Are you going to, when you go through this, because I see a couple of questions from people, are you going to be going through each one of the cues, like the T-vals, just to help people understand?
Yes, I am. I'm going to go through it, yes, because you have to know how to use cue capture. Okay, and so I will go through the show step by step before I assign you to do it. Okay.
I'm also really interested in the Zoom. I've never actually seen it, so
yes, I will show you every detail of the cue file. If we run out of time, you don't have a time to work on it yourself, you can always do it on your own. So yes, I will go through it in detail if you're interested.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. That's why they pay me the big bucks. Is Chris?
All right.
Yeah, Chris, we're done. Take us away.
All right, kicking you out. See you guys in 10. Get a break.
Thanks,
Get
Dr.
a real
Reed.
break.
Buddy.
Thanks, Steve.
It's your mom telling you to get a break.